G'day YouTube, we're in the purpose-built Moto garage with yet another build rundown. Sitting behind me is a Royal Enfield Bullet Classic 500, or at least what's left of it. This bike had been previously modified, but it wasn't quite up to scratch. Dave came to us with a few ideas on what he needed done, and we've executed on that. Let me take you through what we've done on this Royal Enfield Bobber 500. The bike's so nice, we had to shoot it twice. Isn't that right, Mr. Lose All My Footage? We'll start on the rear of this bike because that's where most of the work has been done. If you're familiar with how these Bullet 500s look as they come stock, you know that this thing's been heavily modified. What we didn't build here was the swing arm. We just had to modify the mount. So the suspension setup has been drastically changed. When we got it, it was quite high in the rear, which caused the forks to be really steep in the front. It wasn't too stable at high speeds. So what we've done is rebuild the rear suspension and lower it down, also adding a 21-inch front wheel, which helped with the style that we were after, but it also helped to bring that front up a bit as well, relaxing the steering angle and making this thing handle a whole lot better. In detail, what we've done here is remount the rear suspension on the swing arm here. This has been done previously, we just had to re-brace it and strengthen it up a little bit, and then we've rebuilt this suspension mount on the front. So it comes up under the stock backbone, and we've braced all that up in there, making it nice and strong. We've also had to nip off the old subframe here that sort of curls up this way underneath the seat to make it all nice and clean. The rear fender here has been swing arm mounted. It's got a nice little mount up on the front of the swing arm here. And then we've just used a really simple setup with our fabrication bungs and some stainless steel bar, integrating an orbit tail light and a set of our LED indicators that have been Frenched in, all the wiring's hidden. This is a really cool piece that we've made. So turn this up on the lathe, hollowed this bit of stainless steel bar out and shaped it up. So the orbit bolts on here, sort of like a seamless setup, and the cable runs away all nice and hidden. The rear rim on this bike was an 18 when we got it, so they're running an 18 on the rear, 19 on the front. What we've done is put a 21 on the front and then use this 19 on the rear. Changing the rims out, they were just a standard steel chrome rim. We've put some nice polished aluminium H-pattern rims or Valance rims on this bike. I've been really loving these lately, as you've probably seen on a lot of our build videos. They just go so nicely with the classic style and add that little bit more detail over a standard pattern rim. And you got the bonus of the extra strength there as well. And when you polish them up, you have that nice high sidewall that shines really well. So I'll just flip this up so you can see what's under here. Not really much, but just to explain what we've done in terms of the fab work here. So we've got our rear suspension top mount mounted onto the frame with a nice heavy bracing there. And then we've made this floating seat section. So swung off the rear of the backbone, this is like a 5mm mild steel plate that we've put a set of mounting bungs on, and our seat has a bit of thread in it. So this was done so we could have a nice sort of floating bobber seat over our rear fender. So it's a ribbed lowbrow fender that we used. I wanted to sort of showcase that a bit because it's a really nice part of the project. So that setup has turned out really nicely. We just cut out a steel mounted pan and put a hinge on the front there. You're never going to hinge this thing up, but it's a really neat way of finishing these, especially when they're not tucked under the tank, when they're sitting exposed. So sent this little setup out to Jamo from Timeless Auto Trim. He's done a really nice, simple, glossy leather on this one that's turned out really, really well. So I'll take you through a bit of the housekeeping stuff that we had to do in the center of the bike here. Obviously there's very minimal room to hide any of the electrics and sensors and stuff that we need to hide on this thing, being an EFI bike. So underneath here, we've got a battery box mounted up underneath the swing arm, cables coming up, and then we've had to fabricate a little cover here. So there's a small inline fuse for the tail light. That was just like a stock Royal Enfield thing that we've retained. A few of the sensors, the CDI and the tip over sensor, as well as the regulator rectifiers mounted on the backbone. It's not an ideal setup, but we literally had nowhere else to put it on this thing. You got obviously our DNA filters, you got a crank breather here, and that's just been fitted directly onto your throttle body. The engine we didn't really have to do too much on. It was a running and riding bike. So we've just taken it out, given it a good clean, semi-polished up these cases just by hand because you didn't want to disassemble everything, and put it back in, wired it up, and it fired second or first go, and it actually runs pretty nice. I haven't ridden one of these bikes before, but just to get around town and have a bit of fun on, it's a pretty fun little machine now, especially that it's a lot lighter than what it was before. On the handlebar section, a lot of this stuff has been retained as stock. So the headlight nacelle is a really cool part of this. I think even given the opportunity, I probably wouldn't change it. It's such a really cool piece. I think it's all cast aluminium. So painted up, it looks really nice. We've got like a set of really low set wide cruiser bars that were on the bike when we got it. Some bar end turn signals. The only thing that we've fitted up on this set of handlebars is a pair of our tiny little mirrors here. We had to repair these running lights. There was a couple of like bad connections behind there, so those are being sorted out. The headlight given a bit of a polish, and the front fender was a nice custom piece that we had too. I never really got a chance to see what the factory fender was like, but what was on there wasn't really crash hot. So what we've done here is use a set of bar clamps that are normally used for a steering damper. So they clamp over your fork tube. We got the right size to suit the fork bottoms here, and then fabricated a mount off of that. We've used our front fender and the universal mounting kit that's available at purposebuiltmoto.com. So we've taken those parts off the shelf here and fabricated up a really nice custom piece on the front end that sort of ties the bike in with everything. Generally on one of these, I'd prefer not to run a front fender, but the police have other ideas where we live, so this had to be there, and I'm glad that we got the opportunity to sort of like make something that looks pretty at home on the front of this bike too. The forks were stripped and rebuilt. We've polished the lower forks, and then obviously, as I said before, we fitted a 21-inch front rim on here, polished it up, stainless steel spokes, and that sort of finished out the stance of this bike really, really well. Generally, the paint design on these bikes is one of the last things we do, or normally the dead last. But the exhaust on this project happened really late in the game, which I'll get to in a second. Dave and I got together and were looking over the paint colors and stuff like that. He didn't really have too much of an idea. We wanted something classy, but not too bold. We were going through military greens and all sorts of stuff. I think we poured over these color books of maybe 5 or 6 of them before we found this. I think it's a weird like Citroen color. It has a super strange name, but it's just like a nice olive green with a really deep metallic sort of luster to it. And then we've gone with, this is a custom design that I got a friend of mine, Max, to sort out. They have a similar setup on these engine cases, but I just wanted to add a little bit more detail because Dave wanted these badges on the side quite large, and if you're just going to transfer that to there, it'd look a little bit stupid. So we've gone with like a little bit more detail on the wing here and that big Royal Enfield logo on the side. Once we had that all finished, we were piecing the bike back together and it was just about to roll out the door. We went to fit up the exhaust as one of the last parts, and it just didn't look at home anymore. With all the stuff that we'd done to this bike, there's a lot of really nice polished finishes on it, and the stainless steel exhaust, while it was a custom made piece, just wasn't really fitting the bill. So I called Dave, him and his wife came down, we had a bit of a chat about it, and unanimously agreed that it needed something a little bit more special than what was on it. So I went out and got these really loose radius bends. Normally you're working with like a 1.5D as like a standard radius bend on an exhaust for stainless steel tubing, but I had these bends specially made up, so as it exits the head, it doesn't really have a straight section. So you have like a tight radius bend going into a really loose radius bend, into a tight radius, and then into a nice loose radius that comes up over this engine case here. And then the muffler section is all hidden inside here. What we've done is, I mean, this is a 500cc bike and the header it's running is like 2-inch, which is way oversized. But in order to hide the muffler and give that look of a straight through pipe, you've got to oversize those headers. Otherwise, you're just going to have weird joins and stuff. It never really looks exactly like a straight through pipe. So we've built in a nice long muffler section through here that quietens down this big thumping single a considerable amount and ends up with a nice smooth note. It still sort of pops because it is a single, but it's actually a really, really good sounding bike. And if you've ever read any of my blogs, I always struggle with building single cylinder exhausts. I never really get them quite as nice as I would like, but we're getting better every day, and this one is probably one of the best ones that we've done yet. That's going to wrap it up for our Royal Enfield bobber build, guys. I'm going to start this thing up so you can hear how that nice exhaust sounds, and I'll take you out for a little test ride. We've been mucking around with the GoPro 360 on our test rides now, a few different mounts and stuff, so if you've got any tips or some feedback on that, make sure you let us know in the comments below. Generally, this is the part where your favorite YouTuber is going to ask you to subscribe to their Patreon. Luckily for you, we're not YouTubers. We're bike builders and parts makers. So if you like the content we create and the bikes we build, or you hate both of those things and just want to grab some gear for your next project, make sure you show your support, jump on our online store and give your bike that purpose-built Moto touch. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.